delighted with the actual theme and the focus of this morning's discussions. For me, Africa and Caribbean relationship is run a bit deeper because I have lived and served on the continent. I have traveled extensively across Africa, and I've spent, I think, most of my professional career working in Africa and dealing with African-related issues, starting with my first assignment with the UN in the beautiful country of Tanzania in the early 90s, and ending with my posting in Mozambique. Africa is a really special place, and we in the Caribbean often speak, and quite honestly and accurately, about our inextricable people and cultural and historical ties, and you can hear the passion for which we hold Africa, as so nicely conveyed by Senator Parker in his opening remarks. But I think where we have been less successful is translating this historical and people and cultural ties into concrete and practical relationships. With all respect, I think that I would like to make the observation that I think our heart is in the right place. We have the goodwill and we have the vision, but it hasn't really been met with commensurate action to help us realize that vision. And I perhaps would want to focus. I would perhaps want to focus just on a few issues. Apologies for that. Just last week, we at the Caribbean Export Development Agency, we convened together with the government of Trinidad and Tobago, CARICOM, and a range of other partners, the first Caribbean Investment Forum that was actually taking place in the Caribbean. And the focus for us was actually on business, creating a platform for business to engage with business, to create business. And our chief guest was my dear brother, Wamkele Meni, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the largest free trade area on the planet in terms of number of countries, which we're talking about 54 countries. And it occurred to me, and in our discussions during the conference last week, what we need to do is to focus on practical and concrete initiatives. And I like very much the perspective shared by my fellow panelists. But for those of us who would have lived and served in Africa, one, it's not a monolith, it's a massive continent, okay? You have Northern Africa, you have Southern Africa, Central Africa, Lusophone Africa, Anglophone Africa, Francophone Africa. So it's very complex. And when we in the Caribbean think about Africa, oftentimes I believe we see it as a large monolith, and it's a bit more complex, a bit more sophisticated than that. We also have to recognize that in terms of trade for us in the Caribbean, we account for around 0.75 of 1% or less than 1% of world trade. Africa, around 2.5%, 3%. Wamkele Mene, in his remarks at the Caribbean Investment Forum, indicated that Singapore has a greater GDP than the entire continent. And that's why there's this massive focus to streamline the trade processes and to streamline links and to boost intra-African trade, because it's like a massive continent, as we all agree. But in terms of our strategy for engaging with Africa, that's why I really enjoyed Rosalie's presentation, because Rosalie spoke extensively about Sierra Leone. And we need to be, I think, region-specific in terms of our engagement. I think for us in the Caribbean to engage across 54 countries, I think it's quite difficult. And therefore, where can we get quick wins and lay the strongest possible foundation to boosting trade and investment? I would argue, one, West Africa. Our people came from West Africa. Culturally, it's quite similar. Having lunch in Accra, Ghana on a Sunday is like having lunch here in Barbados or in Guyana or Trinidad and Tobago or Jamaica. So the ties are much closer with West Africa. And that's why you see businesses like Republic Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, the largest indigenous bank in the Caribbean, setting up shop in Ghana. And from all accounts, they have been very, very successful. So one, region specific. Secondly, we also have to engage more systematically in a more organized manner with states of similar size and structure to those in the Caribbean. So we have to have a focus as well in our engagement with the SIDS, the small island developing states in Africa, whether we're talking about Cape Verde, whether we're talking about Madagascar, we're talking about Seychelles, we're talking about Mauritius, and small states in Africa, whether we're talking about Namibia, Sierra Leone, Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland, whilst of course engaging with a full range of countries in Africa. So that's one point I wanted to make, the need for us to have focus. Secondly, in terms of geographic focus, we need to have a trade and investment and a commercial focus as well, because we've heard a lot of data and extensive comments about the size of African trade, the size of Caribbean trade, the importance of having these overall frameworks. And of course, I agree with all those comments made. But to my mind, we need to have a forensic support in terms of creating the platform for business, African business, to engage with Caribbean business. But it's a massive continent, as we have already argued, and we also agree. And therefore, we have to be quite specific as well. So one priority sector, to my mind, has to be on services. So we talk about the business of music, the business of fashion, the business of culture. Africa is the youngest is the youngest continent on the planet, with an estimated 60% of its population under the age of 25. And therefore, how do we create that platform and that framework to engage and do business with our artists, whether it's our reggae performers, whether it's our soca artists out of Trinidad and Tobago, or artists across the Caribbean? The creative sector, to my mind, has a lot of potential. And the young people in Africa and the young people in the Caribbean, they're not waiting for us to come up with that perfect framework and that perfect architecture. But we need that policy framework to focus heavily on the services sector. Secondly, and related to the services sector, has to do with our strength in tourism. When I think about Africa, I think about an LDC, a least developed country like Malawi. My friend Kina Mafonda, who was the former High Commissioner of Malawi to the United Kingdom, and in my time in London, Kina and I spent a lot of time together. Kina told me that Lake Malawi, has more species of fish and plant than all the rivers and lakes of Africa combined. But yet the world doesn't know about that. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because our expertise in the tourism sector is probably second to none. And we have a massive opportunity to provide that knowledge, that business of knowledge, right? And that expertise in tourism to provide support to tourism authorities across the continent. Similarly, I come from Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, the principal advisor to His Excellency Nyusi, Felipe Nyusi, the president of Mozambique in the energy sector, is a former Minister of Energy of Trinidad and Tobago, Eric Williams, who was my neighbor when I was in Maputo. So there are niche sectors where we have a lot of expertise that we can lend to Africa, and they can benefit from the Caribbean. Because one must also recognize that as a small region, notwithstanding the fact that we are the sixth region of Africa, which is excellent, we have to have a forensic focus on where we can add value and where it is good for Africa and it's good for the Caribbean. The next area, to my mind, that's absolutely critical is in the area of agriculture. Given our own food insecurity in the Caribbean and the achievements places like South Africa, places like Kenya, they have made in the agriculture sector, particularly with leveraging technology, I think opens up a lot of opportunities for us in the Caribbean. Continue on practical and concrete engagements. What I would propose going forward is that building on the dialogue that we have already had here in Barbados at the political level and some initial business engagement is an annual Africa-Caribbean business forum or business dialogue, where it is alternated between 1 year in Africa and the second year in the Caribbean. But again, the success of our Caribbean Investment Forum just last week was because the focus was on business, as I indicated earlier, creating that platform for business to engage with business, to create business in 3 or 4 principal sectors. So less features, more focus on the businesses, and creating that platform for business to engage, to advance a really systematic and organized agenda. My own view is that I take the point that the most honorable Patrick Patterson made, and other speakers as well, is that whereas we in the Caribbean, we must continue, as they are doing, as is taking place as we speak at COP27, continue to highlight the need for climate finance and development assistance. And I think we need to continue to do that, given our own climate vulnerability, and we haven't created this crisis. But I think at the same time, that's going to be difficult in coming. And as Caribbean people, as proud Caribbean people, and as African people are very proud as well, is that we need to stand on our own 2 feet. And we need to be masters of our own destiny. And that's why I really heavily support this focus on that trade and investment and business relationship with a very forensic focus on key sectors: agriculture, tourism, the creative sector, and those associated with the services sector, because that will enable us to create jobs and opportunities for our people at a time of unprecedented challenge, at a time of unprecedented crisis. I think looking ahead again is that, one, Ambassador Mukuk spoke about a framework, so that's vital, but I like very much Rosalie's emphasis on specific country experiences and to focus where we can get some quick wins and to lay a strong foundation for a robust engagement with Africa. The last point I want to speak to is the point of commercial diplomacy. I think we in the Caribbean as well, it's so critically important to transition from a traditional approach of diplomacy where we do more representation and more political representation. I mean, I was speaking with my friend, the ambassador from Mauritius to the United Kingdom, and I said, the High Commissioner, I said, High Commissioner, what is your priority? Are you going to come to all this Commonwealth Board of Governors meeting? He said, Deodat, when I have time, I would come. And of course, this is a priority. But my number one priority is to generate trade and investment to create jobs and opportunities for our people in Mauritius. And similarly, our engagement with Africa at the diplomatic level has to translate and has to have a forensic and a heavy focus on commercial representation and supporting our Caribbean businesses to establish a meaningful footprint and to encourage investors from Africa to come to the Caribbean. So these are some thoughts that I wanted to share with this distinguished audience, and I'm delighted to have had this opportunity. Ambassador Bernal, my deepest gratitude to you, and thanks to you and everyone. I look forward to this platform continuing to grow from strength to strength, and congratulations